back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Team Jackson.
Oh, fuck, that would have been a better intro, wouldn't it have?
I said it specifically to show you up, that I had thought of it and you had.
Fuck, man.
I did it specifically to flex. How do you feel?
Like I'm the fool in this relationship.
Well, there's no bigger fool than me for suggesting that we sit down and watch Twilight. Ayo!
Jackson, why the fuck are we watching Twilight?
Excellent question, Sean, my dear. So Twilight is a movie based off of a young adult novel. Now, you may or may not know this, dear listener, but I too have written a young adult novel, and it is coming out on May 25th. You can order it, pre-order it even, on Amazon. It's called Kelly Is Unbreakable, and I figured that in celebration, I need to pay homage to the OG, to the king of YA, Twilight. I guess the king of YA is probably Harry Potter, but shut up.
I was just about to say, there are, I would argue, like, 3 princes and 2 dukes above Twilight at this point, as far as the quote-unquote king of YA.
You know, you have to respect the OG. Twilight may not have the same, you know.
Twilight's not the OG either, though. Harry Potter came out before it.
But is Harry Potter about vampires? I don't know. I thought I'd come up with something clever, and I didn't. It is about vampires. There are vampires in it, I think.
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure it is.
There are definitely werewolves.
How is Stephanie Meyer on trans rights? Because we can always lean into that one. Like, we're trying to stay away from the TERFs.
You know, my gut feeling is that as like a Mormon, like I wouldn't count on it, but maybe,
Who knows? There might be some very big like trans allies over that way in Stephanie Meyer. We don't know. We didn't look it up because that would be research. And if you expect us to do research on this podcast, well, if it's not something very interesting to one of us, we're not going to. And Twilight is not really one of those things, although I feel like we both have a decent amount of feelings about it.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about in a second here, because first I want to provide some context on a couple of things. First and foremost, what is Twilight? Well, if you somehow don't know what Twilight is, it was like the original vessel for Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart. It was this, I don't want to call it a weird love story because that sounds derogatory towards love stories on the whole, and as we'll dig into, I don't think that the issue with Twilight is the love story. The issue with Twilight goes far deeper than that, but it is a love story between Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson, and eventually Werewolf Boy, whose name I'm totally blanking on because he has done nothing since these movies.
He was Shark Boy.
Yeah. Oh, right. Shark Boy and Werewolf Boy, the seminal movie from Robert Rodriguez.
He's like a Pokemon, you know, he evolved.
Right. Yeah. And that is right. I can remember Robert Rodriguez did Shark Boy and Lava Girl, but Taylor Lautner.
He's done it. You got it.
Regardless, it's Jacob is the Robert Pattinson's character. He's a vampire. He falls in love with the girl that everyone falls in love with, Bella, Kristen Stewart's character, and the team. No, Edward is the vampire. Jacob is the
You sound like Watto trying to strike a deal with Qui-Gon Jinn right now.
This is not a hard thing to describe. I have better described movies that are like deep, complex plots. And yet here I am being like, there's 3 characters that you need to keep track of, and I can't keep track of them.
And you have successfully kept track of one.
It's a love triangle, YA romance, supernatural novel. There you go. It got turned into a movie. Now, the other thing that we want to talk about before we really start to dive into stuff is that we're not here to just deliver the lukewarm takes that everyone has heard. We all know that the movie adaptation is bad. We're here to kind of look a little bit further than that, than be like, why did, when Bella walked in, Edward went, stinky, and was fucking goofy. That's silly. That's weird. That's nothing. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that's stupid. We don't want to talk about just that. We want to examine it as a phenomena and as a piece of media 11 years out. So that's what we're going to do.
Twilight is far more interesting as a cultural phenomenon than as a story, because there's probably no single media franchise that was so universally loved and hated. There was no middle ground. Like it's funny that like if you somehow don't know what Twilight is, I'm willing to wager that like there's a decent chunk of younger people who have never seen it just because it did not have the same staying power, like culturally, that something like Harry Potter did. I think
it did have a weird resurgence over the past year in quarantine, though. So a number of people might have stumbled into it that way.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons I was thinking about it. Actually, is that like I know people who are like getting nostalgic about Twilight and going back to it.
We just had a friend who went back and read all the books and then watched all the movies, I think.
Quarantine, people are gonna rediscover things. I mean, that about tracks. Because the thing about Twilight, I think what makes it more interesting to talk about as a phenomena than as I hate you. A pox upon your house. But the thing that makes Twilight more interesting to talk about culturally, we'll say, is that the story itself, part of me was going into this, like, partly because there's been the resurgence, kind of hoping, was Twilight secretly based all along? Especially because, we don't have to relitigate the whole thing, but Stephanie Meyer got way, way, way too much fucking hate just for writing some fucking vampire book and, it being popular with, teenage girls. And that was enough for the entire, culture to decide we need to, shame this woman into submission, even though she had done nothing wrong.
Still a better love story than Twilight, am I right, fellow lay Redditors?
Oh, God.
Bacon narwhals at midnight.
When I was just scrolling through the Wikipedia pages I usually do, I was reminded that Vampires Suck was a thing that came out.
Oh my God.
See, so much of the Twilight hate is way cringier in hindsight than Twilight ever was, right?
Twilight was at its worst fine. What I mean by that is that it never became something toxic or horrible. Obviously you had the Team Jacob versus Team Edward stuff going on, but I don't really ever remember that erupting into full out flame war type thing going on where people were getting doxxed and shit like that. Well, Stephanie Meyer, kind of its own beast, but I mean on the actual fandom, it felt fairly low key from an outsider perspective. But from an outsider perspective, the people who hated on Twilight just fucking hated on it. It was just, and it was entirely because it was a popular with young teen girl franchise. Looking at it now, it's fine. Is it good? Not particularly, but is it bad? Also, not particularly. It's going to appeal to a certain subset of audience, and I'm not here to knock that subset of audience. I mean, Edward's a little weird, but
But the weirdness is part and parcel to why it appealed to so many people is the thing because that's the thing about Twilight I think makes it so uninteresting to talk about, not so removed from all the cold takes, as it were, is that if you are the sort of person who gets hot and bothered by the classic, oldest time trope of the distant, borderline psychopathic bad boy boyfriend in fiction. If you are the sort of person, if that revs your engine, Twilight is perfectly calculated to appeal to you. If you are not into that sort of thing, it's going to do absolutely nothing for you. And, on top of that, it really was the perfect storm because it was like there were a lot of surface level elements that were an easy target for dumb Redditors. Just go, her sparkles.
Sparkles, look at that. It's so stupid. And it was also the peak of gay as an insult, which that was just a perfect confluence in that situation.
Yup. And, so it was around that time. Even the Lindsay Ellis video about Stephanie Meyer talks about this. It wasn't even safe from other women precisely because of the weird complex misogyny, internalized misogyny of not wanting to appear hashtag the other girls, and looking at it for the problematic elements. That's a great video. You all should watch it if you're somehow 30 and still mauling over Twilight somehow, you psychopath.
Wait, Jackson, you can't recommend Lindsay Ellis on this podcast. We've never done that before, and that's very off-brand for us. What are you doing? What are you saying?
Very off-brand. We've never recommended a Lindsay Ellis video. In fact, you should probably watch all the Lindsay Ellis videos first and then come back to us, but you probably won't want to come back to us because you realize how many of my points are just regurgitated. The point being is that I think that the culture of Twilight, especially now that it is, again, there is a resurgence, but for a while at least, time will tell if this is just a, sort of hey, remember Pogs sort of thing. But as far as genuine cultural staying power, pretty much the only YA book that's had any, I feel is Harry Potter, and that makes me sort of sad. And I have a theory as to why that is. Not to slog any particular YA book that's coming out now, time will tell. But nobody really thinks much about Twilight or the Hunger Games in particular is sort of what I'm thinking about now. Those don't tend to get talked up so much anymore. And I think a lot of it is just because the marketing behind YA is so fucking trend driven. I think one of the reasons, tragically, that these sorts of things that people really loved, I think it's not just a matter of everyone woke up and realized how bad Twilight was and we grew out of our silly young things. No, I think what happened was that there were so many books and imitators that followed that formula because
50 Shades. Oh wow, that one felt like it came from my soul and was literally just a retelling of Twilight, except with S&M subtext to it, or not even subtext, S&M text to it. Wow, I apologize. I don't even know what I said. That's all my bad.
Yeah, so God, 50 Shades, our favorite whipping boy Beastly for the Nintendo Wii. That's a good meme. There were,
I've seen all of those. I think you haven't seen any 50 Shades, right?
I have not seen any 50 Shades.
And I have to assume that you have not watched Beastly.
I was not into the I kind of started reading more YA stuff around the time Hunger Games came out. So the paranormal Twilight stuff kind of had come and gone. So I never watched any of it or read any of it seriously. And as a meme, I never really dug into it as a meme either, because Beastly in and of itself is not that funny until you realize there's a video game for the Nintendo Wii.
Jackson, hang on. I'm thinking about this, and I'd be concerned going into this of okay, why do we have two white dudes who this demographic theoretically should not be targeting at all? And for you, the answer is fairly easy. It's that you're a YA author and have opinions on this stuff. I just realized why I have at least a little bit of authority on this one.
Oh, no.
And that is, not only have I seen, this is my second time watching Twilight. I've also seen the final movie of Twilight twice. I haven't seen any of the other ones.
Don't worry too much about that. Can of worms.
Yes. But I've also watched Beastly. I've watched all of the 50 Shades movies. I've seen Blood and Chocolate, which is a kind of similar veined property that I watched with Sam because she's like, I watched this as a kid, and that was just a whole other can of worms. And I've seen The Vampire Academy, I think is the movie, twice now. I have a weird amount of film knowledge in regards to supernatural YA pseudo romance movies.
That's actually, we talked about Warm Bodies, which was very much sort of parodying this trend. It's funny because when it comes to YA, I definitely there was a while there when I was like a dipshit high schooler, like first few years of high school. I didn't do a lot of reading. I read fucking Halo books like a moron. But I was somewhere, I think sophomore year, I probably picked up The Hunger Games. And I was like, oh wow, this is actually, I really, really enjoy this. And people dog on this, and I'll defend. I haven't reread it in a while. I'll defend The Hunger Games as like a legitimately good book. I think, like Twilight, it suffered from having so many imitators and being so getting so worn down by that dystopia trend that
I also never read it because it got so popular that it was that perfect age for me to be like, I'm not going to read that. It's too cool.
No, I know what you mean. But yeah, so that sort of was when I jumped onto the YA thing, and the current trends are way different now. I think that I haven't been as tuned in since the majority of work on my book was done earlier. I think the trend, at least in genre fiction, not like drama. I think the dramas still tend to follow the socially conscious hate you give model at the moment. But I think right now high fantasy is pretty popular. Anyway, I don't know for sure. I'm a little out of the loop. But regardless, that's Twilight, and this whole subgenre was a boat that I missed. Even though, if I'm being honest with myself, this sort of story is something that appeals to me. I think one of the reasons that I ultimately ended up going indie with my book, and one thing that I was actually afraid of, because by the time I started writing Kelly Is Unbreakable, the Twilight trend had long passed. Paranormal romance was over. And my book is not a paranormal romance. It doesn't have this sort of structure. But a lot of the surface level elements are very similar. There are two characters, boy and a girl. One of them's got something kind of supernatural about him. Takes place in a small, shitty town. It's mostly about their relationship. In practice, it's more of a buddy comedy than a romance. But still, you can see how someone would look at that and be like, oh, this is superhero Twilight, and that is a decade late, which is sad, because I think that there's something weirdly existential to me about that an entire subgenre. It happens in other mediums and in other demographics, but with YA, it's especially noticeable just because of how trend-driven it is. That certain genres will get ground into the dust by the cold, unfeeling cogs of capitalism at record rates. We see it happen before with the Western and stuff, but yeah, we go through these YA trends every couple of years because they don't publish anything else, and then people get burnt out on them, and that's sad. So if you're looking for something different, try my book.
Kelly Is Unbreakable, now available on Amazon.com.
You can get it for paperback or Kindle.
I don't know where to pick up from here. I won't lie. That was a good you snuck in that sell, you snuck in the pitch, and now I'm just trying to figure out where to pick it up now that you've put it down.
Well, because I guess with Twilight there are a couple of different places to go. I guess to make it clear, because my only experience with Twilight, I've seen. Oh no, I've got a great story. I have to tell the story about why I've even seen it in the first place. Because the first Twilight movie I ever saw was the last one, Breaking Dawn Part 2, which I went specifically because people told me it was extremely funny, and not just in a her Twilight way, but in an actual this is madness sort of way. And it is. Breaking Dawn Part 2 is fucking amazing. You should definitely watch it. But so I actually had convinced Sean to go to our campus cinema showing Breaking Dawn Part 2.
Oh God, it's this story.
It's this story. Because I'm like, Sean, this is madness. You have to see this. And he didn't regret it, did you, Sean?
I did not regret the back half of the story you're about to tell.
Well, He regretted this part, but they handed us, they had 3 little cute popcorns. We came and were like, oh, thanks. I sat down with my popcorn, and a Campus Cinema Club comes up and they're like, hey, all, welcome to Twilight Night. We're gonna have a great time. We're gonna have a great show. Hope you all enjoy it. But before we get started on the movie, check under your popcorn bags and check for a little like star. And I was fucking pumped. I immediately, I almost yeeted my popcorn out of my hands. I was looking for that star so fucking fast. I pulled it up to eye level. I was like, shit, it's not there. And I'm looking around. They're like, should be 3 stars on the popcorn bags. Anyone got them? 2 people come up, and there's kind of a silence. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, fuck, who's the fucker that got that last one? I'm a fucking show off clown. I want to be up on that stage. And I see Sean trying to quietly tuck the popcorn bag under his seat. And I just slowly turn to him, and I'm like, Sean, do you have a star? And he's like shaking his head like, no. And I stand up, and I'm about to point to him like that one episode of King of the Hill where Hank and his family are trying to escape from the bleachers, and Dale's following him with that pointer finger, like, there he is. I'm about to do this to Sean, but before I get the chance, he shoves the popcorn bag in my hand. Is like, you want it so fucking badly, you take it.
I wanted nothing to do with this. I'm like, I already feel out of my element. Like, I'm going to this movie to kind of laugh and have a good time with it. But there's a lot of people there who are clearly there to actually watch the movie. And so I'm trying to be very respectful of that. I'm trying to keep my head down, just be like, okay, I'm going to have a good time with it. But I'm not going to disturb anyone around me because they're here in earnest. And I don't want to be that person. And so I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. If I win something, I will be it's me. Look at me. I'm here and I don't want this.
Meanwhile, I can never resist a good prize. So naturally, I skip on up, overjoyed. And they're like, all right, guys, choose from your prizes. And I think to my credit, I'm pretty sure I allowed the other 2 people to choose first, because the prizes were, of course, DVDs of the other Twilight movies. And the other people too chose the second and third one, I think. And that left the first one for me. And I was like, perfect. The last one's the only one I've seen. I could bookend it. I could see the first one and I could see the last one. So Sean and I were having a debate. We're not sure if I made him sit down and watch it based on this. I don't think so. I think I made another friend watch it when we were bored.
I swear, if we didn't watch this in college as a direct result of this interaction, I feel like I don't know what the fuck happened. I feel like we had to have.
I remember we definitely talked about it, but I think that I don't know exactly. But regardless, I watched it one time because I owned it on DVD and, cajoled either Sean or another friend into watching it with me. And that was years ago. That was, college times, or either way. So again, was kind of hoping, kind of a hope against all hope that Twilight would be secretly based, because I'm a sucker for this Pacific Northwest dreary small town kind of character driven love story. I eat that shit up. I slurp that fucking shit up.
There's some genuinely cool stuff, cool, good ideas in the film. And the movie does a nice job of nailing that small town Northwest aesthetic. It's got a lot of Twin Peaks, Alan Wake vibes to it, which are very, very good. It does have a little bit of that overexposed, too bright lighting that we talked a little bit about in Insidious, where everything feels a little bit washed out, but it's not nearly as bad as it is in Insidious. And so it just ends up being a fairly aesthetic vibe, and one that I also quite enjoy. And there are some characters. The cop dad is just a fucking peach. I kind of love the cop dad.
Someone give me a cut of the movie that is just about Bella and Cop Dad, and is just a little teen coming of age drama about the awkward relationship between a father trying to reconnect with his daughter. He just wants to have fucking lunch with her in the diner, dude. He's just trying his best.
And honestly, and this is genuinely not a dig necessarily on the story or plot or ideation of Twilight, but on basically the quality of how people treated Twilight in making this film. The relationship between Bella and her dad might be the most basically any relationship that the dad has is the most chemistry in the movie. The dad may be the only person who gives a single fuck in this entire movie.
God bless that beautiful fucking man. Jesus Christ. No, I completely agree. I love the dad. And like some of the other like side characters are interesting ideas, and I'm not gonna play the game of like, oh, wouldn't it have been better? I just did that. Like, give me a cut of the movie. But like I'm not going to level that as a serious criticism, right? Of like, oh, the movie should have been about the vampire doctor and the cop dad. Even though, like, sure, that sounds like a fun movie, but that's that's not a helpful criticism for this movie.
I think it's the plot of True Blood. I don't know. I've never seen True Blood, but that sounds like the plot of True Blood.
I mean, the vampire doctor guy he's got a reasonable amount of charisma. I mean, he's just as checked out as everyone else, but he's nice. So like, I kind of like him. And there's sort of an interesting story, if a little fucked up one, about like how he gives people the Sophie's choice of like turning them into vampires, and then has a weird, not quite incest family with them.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of like really clever background stuff that it would be really easy to zone in and be like, okay, I want to watch that movie. I want to watch that movie. There's some like teen drama movie that you kind of want to watch. And I think the reason that it's so easy to zone in on that stuff is, again, I'm not here to shit on the core of Twilight. I am here to shit on the execution of the movie of Twilight, and entirely based on the fact that no one in this movie, barring like the dad, has any interest in giving it the time of day. Edward and Bella, both Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, do not give a fuck about being in this movie. Both of them are very talented actors, and neither one of them do anything in this fucking movie at all. No. They both just kind of sit there half asleep, sometimes literally asleep with each other. And so your mind starts to gravitate to other background characters, and you start to notice other things happening, like, that looks interesting. Like when the dad was fighting with the Native American werewolf in the wheelchair. Like, what the fuck was that about? What's going on back there?
They were like kicking each other like children. Like,
yeah.
Honestly, I do kind of love. There's a lot of awkwardness in this movie that I find very endearing. Like in a way that almost feels purposeful. Cause
kind of like Michael Cera movie-esque, like of the time.
Like Bella's beta orbiters are so cringeworthy in like that perfect high school way.
Yeah. I mean, if they weren't all immediately in love with her in the second they saw her, it might be a little bit more interesting. But I mean, there's something there as well. Again, it's hard to talk about this movie without kind of criticizing some of the innate elements to it, but I'm really trying not to.
Well, because for me, the issue is pretty simple when it comes to the actual story, and I think this relates to why, we tend to gravitate to these background elements, is that like the core of the story should be, the love story, the development between these two characters, Edward and Bella. Now, Bella, is, blank slate, like, audience insert. That's fine. That's less of a problem.
The reason Edward can't read her mind is because it's just static noise.
No thoughts, head empty.
I apologize. That was a low blow.
It's a good bit though. But no, so for me, it's less of a problem that Bella's kind of an audience surrogate. That, there's a lot of movies that do that, and it's not my, given the choice in basically any situation, I'd rather have a richer character, but you can make that work. Especially if like Edward is super like, charismatic and cool and interesting, which he's not. Edward sucks. And that's the big problem. And this is where maybe I start bridging into like, don't give the cold take category, but it is related to all this. It's like the fact that,
well, hey, before you even dive into that, I have a question for you. If it's not, maybe we don't have to talk about the fact that Edward sucks, because everyone knows that Edward sucks. Everyone knows that Edward is the psychopath who stalks her and watches her sleep and all that good stuff. But I wonder if the core issue with the film, and this might be something that the book handles better, is more so the pacing with which Edward and Bella just like, there's no hot and cold. You don't tickle the balls on the way to this romance. It's just like, stinky, oh wait, just kidding, I love you too, I'm gonna be with you forever. Like, there's no build to that climax to the situation in which Edward comes to save Bella from the vampire at the end and everything like that. Spoilers, I guess. Who fucking cares? But like, there's no build to that. It just, at that point, you already know that he cares about her so deeply that, of course, he's going to be there. There's no question. There's no mystery. There's no wondering about any of this stuff because he is so deeply, inherently in love with her from the word go that you don't get any drama around it.
Yeah, and maybe you know, there is stuff that's chopped out that makes the book a little better in that regard. I think part of it is also that, like, the movie goes super hard on, like, him being an asshole. Like, it's more than him just being, you know, tsundere or whatever, like, baka. But, like, he's, like, you know, sitting there, like, seething with anger, like, you know, when she sits down next to him. And it's like, legitimately a little unsettling. And I think that, so not only is there not that buildup of, like, like, you know, they don't have much of a back and forth where they're kind of like assholes to each other, but, like, you know, that intensity belies a greater passion, such as the trope.
Enemies to lovers is a thing for a reason.
Yes.
People like that shit. This movie should be all about that, but it's just not. It's enemies, and by enemies, I mean Edward glares at her for 10 minutes in a chemistry lab, and then they, like, basically fucking.
Basically, and that's unfortunate, and I think that's really it does all boil down to, like, how do you as a viewer respond to Edward if you're into that, like bad boy, like, ooh, I'm too dangerous and distant. If that's your fetish, more power to you. But it's not mine. Like, I'm not engaged in this romance when it's so underdeveloped and so extreme. I think that's what makes it so jarring, because then
it's really hard to, especially from an outsider's perspective in this regard, to turn your brain off and just be involved with, like, oh, this is the romance, this is how this is supposed to happen. I can see why people would be into that. Especially, like, 10 years down the road, everything about that has come more to light about, like, the abuses that Edward is basically engaging in to get Bella to love him in a weird way, and, like, the weird negging and everything like that. Like, there's definitely people who enjoy that in a fantastical setting, and I'm not here to kink shame you for that. If that's what you're into, that's what you're into. But I think, like, if you're not into that, it was weird back in the day. Nowadays, it's deeply unsettling as you're more aware of power dynamics and how this all coalesces into something that is deeply unpleasant.
Yeah, because it's not just that, like, you know, to do my thing, I got to do it. To make a comparison to Dragon Ball Z.
I mean, you know, I would say that's out of left field, but the end of the last movie is just Dragon Ball Z, so...
The end of the last movie is the greatest Dragon Ball Z movie. But Vegeta is also, you know, like, a bad boy sort of character. Vegeta, like, strictly speaking, is worse than Edward, because he, like, blows up planets and is, like, a literal genocidal monster, man. He's worse, but we're more okay with, like, you know, Vegeta slowly adapting and having, you know, a son with Bulma and, like, that sort of thing. And, you know, it's easy to go, like, ooh, like, what a badass, what a bad boy, if he's, like, your husbando or whatever, because there's not that realness to Vegeta. Like, Vegeta, he's a monster, but he's not an abuser. And the way that he's a monster is so over the top, it's hard to, like, you know, internalize that seriously. But the ways that, like, you know, Edward treats Bella, if that's, you know, if that could be touching a lot of real pulsing veins.
It's very real and down to earth in ways that are deeply uncomfortable. Your abuser will not be like, yeah, just kidding, I was blowing up planets before I met you, because that's impossible. But if your abuser was asking you, are you afraid of me? You should be. That's some red fucking flags in a very real sense.
And that's, again, that's sort of the trouble with with talking about Twilight is that, like, the criticisms, like, as far as the actual dissection of the text, have always been valid. It's just the way that they've been expressed and the way that was sort of weaponized into a harassment campaign against Stephenie Meyer was not.
And everyone who liked the series. Let's not just...
Oh, of course.
Because, I mean, there were a lot of people who just got fucking harassed for it for no good reason because the stigma around it was that it was bad, even when people didn't read it. I didn't read it, and, I mean, I had a cousin who read it. I'm like, that's weird. Why are you reading that? Isn't it for girls and bad and stuff like that? And he was like, no, it's pretty good. I don't know what the issue was. And, like, the mentality around it was just toxic, and it pervaded almost everyone in one form or another, and I'm not proud to admit that. I would like to think that I'd come around on if someone came to me now and was like, I'm reading Twilight. My question would be, that's weird. Why are you reading Twilight in 2021? But I wouldn't judge them for it in the way that I did way back when.
I will say, because I've tried to remember if I was, because I was never big on the Twilight hate train for sure. I feel like my reaction to it was more like, almost, I mean, well, this is what drove a lot of, like, the actual hate. But I feel like I don't remember ever, like, shitting on it, like, super hard, precisely because I didn't read it. But also because I think even then I knew deep down that, like, if I read it, just because of the surface level elements, there was a strong chance I would like it, and that wasn't cool because it was, like, girly or whatever.
Retweet.
So I think I mostly just kept quiet for that reason. And that's a shame. Like, I remember I was going through my parents' bookshelf one time and I saw the book and I'm like, maybe I should just give this a shot. But I think I purposefully didn't because I was like, well, what if I like it? And, like, then I'm gonna be, like, the subject of mockery. So I put it away, and that sucks.
Yeah.
Stupid.
No, I was gonna say I never really I definitely commented on it in my head with my cousin. I didn't outwardly bully him for it or anything like that. That's was never who I was. But, like, I am very much in Jackson's shoes in that, like, I never picked it up because I was like, I'm gonna be made fun of for it, and I honestly kind of envy my cousin's strength in being able to just be like, fuck it, I'm gonna read Twilight and have a great time doing it. Yeah,
unironically. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. I shouldn't neglect to mention any fans who got harassed. But yeah, I think that with, I guess, the reason I keep bringing up Stephenie Meyer is that it hits a little close to home as someone who is about to release a book and now has that book in several people's homes. The physical version, if you order it, it'll come to your house. It'll break street date. You can read it right now, or like in 2 to 3 business days.
It's downstairs in my house right now, and I ordered it from Amazon.
Which you can do too. But, like, the thing about, a work of fiction like that is that, and I'm certain, more than certain, that I've fallen into this trap on the show even of, like, making generalizations or assumptions about the author or the people involved based on my criticism of it. And that shit's just not right. And it's just not fair. A work of fiction is an extremely personal thing. And, like, I can tell you that there are elements that, I probably, whatever flaws in my book, it was like a blind spot, or, like, I interpreted things one way, and, like, because of people's experience, they see it another way. Like, a book, death of the author isn't the end all be all, but it's a useful tool in remembering that, like, a work of fiction is not only the totality of a person, it is, like, a separate entity from them. And I think that's, like, man, Stephenie Meyer was just like a mom who had an idea for a vampire book, and she wrote it and became the most hated woman on the planet for a couple of years. And, like, she didn't Harvey Weinstein anybody. She didn't, like, commit war crimes. She wrote a fucking book. Like, unless, I was about to say, like, unless you're writing, like, Mein Kampf, like you're writing literal Nazi shit, that's probably over the fucking line.
And there is an argument to be made. Again, I have not read Twilight, but I mean, at least from the reading in the movie, that there is dangerous elements to this book. I made a joke to Sam, like, there was the whole thing a while back about how Ramona Flowers ruined a whole generation of girls. Scott Pilgrim ruined a generation of girls, which is shitty, sexist, misogynistic. It's all sorts of problematic to it. But like I was kind of like half kidding about like, you know, Stephanie Meyer ruined a generation of guys because like the argument was that people were seeing in Ramona Flowers that manic pixie dream girl, and that's what guys wanted, and it was ruining women. And oh God, I feel terrible even discussing that because that is just patently wrong and stupid and a bad take. And what I am saying here is also patently wrong and stupid and a bad take, but I do think like the same argument could have been leveled at Twilight in the way of like, guys might read this and interpret it as like, oh, women want to be horribly nagged and stalked and being told that they can not read their all sorts of weird shit around that. Like that can be genuinely dangerous and cause people to miss red flags or do things that are harmful and abusive and not really realize it until someone points it out because, hey, I read in this book and the character there seemed to like it. Like that's why books can be dangerous in that way. And again, it's not Mein Kampf. And again, I think that there is an argument to be made that I am reading too far into this much in the same way that every asshole who read into Scott Pilgrim as ruining a generation of girls could have gotten the wrong thing out of it. But I do think that there is something to keep in mind there that there's some danger in the book, even if it's fairly minimal.
Yeah, I guess like I tend to view the like problematic elements of stuff in media is that like one book, one piece of art on its own is not that powerful. It's when ideas get reinforced again and again culturally, which it is part of a broader system.
There is very easily a system that has reinforced that through like 20 years of Harrison Ford movies in a lot of ways, especially like Indiana Jones and whatnot, where he basically takes the role of Edward and forces himself on women in one way or another throughout that. And then those could arguably be masculine focused movies. And then, you know, when you switch over to Twilight and someone who has been reading just those are like, oh, okay, this isn't something that like I just think is interesting as a man, but like women are into as well type of deal. Like I think that there is a culture that would arise even around that is more what I am getting at.
Sure, but that still doesn't excuse the harassment. Like,
no. I apologize. If that seems like what I have been doing, that is not what I am doing even a little bit here. I am not excusing harassment whatsoever. I got caught on like a sentence Jackson said and just was like, oh, I want to talk about that for a minute. If it seems like I'm excusing harassment, I am 100% not. I apologize.
I didn't think that you were. I just wanted to make sure you made that 100% clear.
That is a fair point. I did not. This is why context matters, kiddos.
Because it is a nuanced conversation, right? Like, yes, on a grand scale, you know, everything, you know, feeds back into these systems, and like, you know, the problematic parts of media are a part of that. But also like, the people who create them are just people fucked up in their own ways, you know, chewed up and spit out by life, products of their environment, just like everybody else. I think that, you know, you can criticize a thing unless it's like, again, I keep saying like, unless it's like Mein Kampf, and I cannot, you know, say, oh, this is exactly the line between problematic thing and Mein Kampf. But I think we could agree that there's a difference between some evil fucking like propaganda shit and like someone having a kink that maybe flies a little too close to the sun, if you know what I'm saying.
No, like, for sure. I don't want to put any blame on Stephanie Meyer for this. Was more extrapolating based on like you know, what could be interpreted as dangerous within the text, and like these are also cold takes to be sure, but it's just something I was kind of thinking about while you were talking. But I do not think that she was. A kink that flies too close to the sun is a good way of putting it, because I do not think that anything in it was intentionally designed to be harmful. It was just something that she presumably found hot in her fucked up religious way, in that, you know, religion is not something I want to talk too deeply about here. But you know what? I can safely say Catholicism has fucked me up in horrible ways. Like when I was talking to our friends last week, and I was just like, I do things that like punish me because I think that they're fun and weird, like watching bad movies and eating hot food. And someone looked at me and just went, "You're a Catholic, aren't you?" And I'm like, oh, fuck, you just nailed me in one there, because I indeed was. And that like weird kind of controlling thing, giving yourself up in that way, very much a religious thing.
100%. Again, these are complicated conversations where like there often is not a line, but I know what's far past the line is like harassing this person for writing a book about her vampire dream. I mean, she literally said she had like a dream about like a hot vampire boyfriend, and that was the spark of the book. Like Twilight is pure id. Mm-hmm. And I don't say that in a derogatory way because I think that's what made it connect with so many people. But
I would say actually Twilight is one step away from pure id. I would say 50 Shades of Grey is pure id, if I'm being honest.
That's fair. I mean, I haven't seen or watched any 50 Shades, but I could see that. I mean, most fan fiction is pure id, frankly. And
again,
that's great.
Not an
I
insult.
love fan fiction.
Fuck it, it's wonderful.
So yeah, that's a spicy meatball. I guess I've been thinking about it because Stephenie Meyer got it bad, but I've been thinking about it recently. And this is. We dog on Zack Snyder movies a lot, and I was thinking about the circumstances around the Snyder Cut of the Justice League, which I haven't watched, and I mean, honestly, probably won't. Like, I'm not that interested. I'm a little curious because people I respect say it's good, but with that though, I was just so heartbroken and felt really glad for him that he got to release it because, after his family tragedy, that made him step away. Apparently, Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder's wife went to see the Whedon cut, and when the movie was done, they turned to each other and like, we can never let Zack see this. We can never let him see what the fuck they did to his movie, like while he was grieving. And like that shit sucks. Like, I may not like Zack Snyder's movies. I may not think highly of his ability to tell a story, but like, doesn't seem like the dude has, done anything wrong as of this point, at least. Maybe he's gonna, it's Hollywood. He could get Me Too'd at any minute, but based on the information that I have now, he's just a guy who wanted to make a movie with some epic shots, and that's fine.
Okay, hang on. He put the Joker in a crown of thorns. I think that right there is something wrong.
Okay, you're right. We gotta go raid his house. Just kidding. We actually don't. Please, that was a joke. But no, seriously. Like, I'm trying to thinking about all this in mind, watching Twilight again has put in perspective that going forward, I'm going to try and keep my criticisms away from the people and more on the actual work, because that's what I would hope that people would do for my book, and whether they like it or they don't, because even if you like things, it can be. There was another thing I was watching, speaking of Lindsay Ellis, she did a Q&A about a spoiler Q&A about her book, and someone had asked her, did anyone else imagine the main character as Lindsay the whole time? She's like, I get it, but that really sucks. And this is a fan, because this person, presumably they're writing fiction because they don't want to just, put their life out there. They feel like they got something else to say, something a little broader. So I don't know. I've been thinking about this stuff, which is one of the reasons I think I wanted to talk about Twilight.
That's totally fair. Meanwhile, I was mostly focused on the fact that no one in this movie did give a shit about it, which I suppose is entirely the personal element of it. But what can you do?
I mean, they really don't, though.
They really don't. They really don't. I mean, even the camera work feels really lazy in a lot of ways. Like, the most cliched shots you can possibly imagine. The fucking effects are feel half baked across the board. Like, I've seen better effects in 80s schlock movies. I don't know. It all feels really half-assed, which I think is a big bummer, because at its core, barring the weird Edward stuff, I don't think that there's necessarily a whole horrible thing wrong with Twilight. I think it's just a fine movie for the people who are into it, if they had made it a fine movie instead of a half-assed thing that they did.
I'll say this. I really, really appreciated that comfy, Seattle vibe. I really liked that. And that's more than I can say for some movies. That's about it, though.
Well, Jackson, as we're wrapping up here, I want to give you a couple minutes. Your book is out in 5 days from when this episode goes live. Tell us a little bit about that and the exact release date and where you can buy it.
Oh my God. All right. So my book is called Kelly is Unbreakable. It is a YA contemporary fantasy. I don't use the word paranormal, not because I'm ashamed of it, but because tragically that word makes other people think of Twilight. And my book is not really like Twilight, aside from some surface level elements. In fact, I'll give you a little plot summary right now. Let's just go ahead and do my best job dramatically reading the back of the book blurb, shall we? Here we go. You ready? You ready for this back of the book blurb? We're gonna do it. Kelly Hatfield was born with superhuman strength. Raw power courses through her, letting her throw cars like baseballs and shatter concrete with ease. But Kelly has no interest in being anything other than ordinary. For the past 10 years, she's been a tightly wound bundle of secrets, masquerading as an average teenager. Nobody knows about her powers. Nobody except Chris. Chris is her only friend and a hot-headed troublemaker. Fistfights with his brother leave him bruised and bloody on the regular. Nightmares keep him from sleep, and if he doesn't get his grades up, he isn't going to graduate high school, let alone escape the rural town suffocating him. For a guy like Chris, Kelly's refusal to take advantage of her talents is infuriating. After all, when you can level buildings with your bare hands, what do you need school for? But lately, Kelly seems to be losing her perfect composure, her powers causing more and more destructive accidents. With distance building between them, Chris senses an opportunity to close the gap by pushing her to use those powers for good. But Chris can't fathom the terrible depths of the secret she keeps. There's no guarantee heroism will help mend Kelly's psyche, or that their friendship is strong enough to withstand the truth. So yeah, that's my overly dramatic reading of the back of the book blurb. Back of the book blurb. Jesus, that is a hard back cover copy. Just fucking say that. Jesus Christ. So if that back cover copy sounded good to you, you could order it on Amazon. Paperback and Kindle versions will be available. If you have other e-readers, it'll be available on other storefronts, but it's going to be on Amazon first. So May 25th, that's next Tuesday, I'm going to be doing at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time a special launch event where I'll be reading a chapter from the book out loud and doing a short Q&A. So please come by, have some merriment and chat. Celebrate with me. It's a big day. I'm very happy about this. And I hope that you, dear theoretical reader, enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it, Sean, because you haven't read it yet. I'm terrified.
I have not. I'm very excited to dig into it, though. So please go order Kelly is Unbreakable on Amazon.com. Support Jackson. Support this presumably wonderful book. I say presumably only because I haven't read it, but I trust Jackson as a writer to write something absolutely stellar that's well worth reading.
I have a master's degree.
For now, though, I've been your host, Sean McKenna. You can find me on Twitter at Sean_McKenna, but you should go follow Jackson instead because he wrote a book and you should pre-order it.
Aw, thanks, pal. Yep, on Amazon. If you need easy links, you can, of course, follow my Twitter, Jackson J. Keller. I will be shilling all the time in many different ways. I've got some Joker's tricks up my sleeve, in fact. But if you want to join in on the festivities on the 25th, please follow me at twitch.tv/Jackson J. Keller. In the meantime, we'll be playing Smash Bros.
I'm also going to put links to the book pre-order in the description of the show notes if you need that too. So, shh.
Hooray!
Follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast, where we tweet about updates and everything going on with the episode. I didn't tweet out an update ahead of the fact that we're watching Twilight because, I don't know, I thought it'd be a fucking wild-ass surprise for everybody. Enjoy. Thought it was the social network. It was me, Twilight. Fuck you.
Speaking of anime...
We have a Patreon, patreon.com/BADHcast. You can check it out. It's paused right now, though. I don't know what that means for anybody who fucking knows. Also, thanks to those that have a few sort of theme song is Suicide. Also, take off the album High and Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go check them out wherever you can. Also thanks to 25yearslaterstate.com. There's a little button in the corner that you can click on. But you should check out the people that are writing over there. There's a lot of really talented people doing a lot of really talented writing. Speaking of anime, what, Jackson?
We're going to be watching Your Name, Koto Shinkai's little fanciful, fantastic little romance movie. I think it's a romance movie. It was big in like 2016. I never watched it despite wanting to see it. But I like anime. Sean gave me free reign to pick things for 2 weeks, around the book launch. And, that's a similar sort of tone. Of course, being such a big anime fan, there's definitely some anime influences on Kelly Is Unbreakable, not least of which is, of course, the fucking title. I'm excited. I just like watching anime.
Giving you carte blanche for 2 weeks is a very dangerous thing. And if you picked Twilight and Your Name, both of which are movies I have seen before, actually, honestly, I think I got off easy at the end of the day here. I'll take it.
I could have made you watch Dragon Ball Super Broly. I could have made you do it, but I didn't.
Bye.